Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is our second virtual financial inclusion information exchange hosted by the Impact Facility. And today we have David Sturms and Candace both joining us, along with some experts in the field. So I'm going to go ahead and let them get started. If you have any comments, you can use the chat, and I think they will, whenever they're ready for engagement, you should be able to unmute yourselves, but you can also just let me know if you're having any issues with that, and we will go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mona, and thank you everybody for joining us today for this 2-hour workshop. We're really excited about that. Before we get started, in case you haven't selected an audio channel yet, this was now pointed out a few times, but please click on the globe button at the bottom of your screen, and you can select between English, French, and Spanish translation. We will have presentations in different languages, so please select the one you're most comfortable with. Just a general note for this workshop: to avoid background noise, kindly stay off your microphone and stay muted. If and when you have questions, especially during the Q&A, we welcome for people to unmute. And ideally, you raise your hand first when we get there, and then we'll ask you to contribute. You can also use the chat box throughout the presentations. If you have questions for clarification, kindly use the chat box to just park them there. And then in terms of structure, we'll have 4 presentations. Each of those is lasting about 20 minutes. And at the end of each presentation, we'll allow a few questions for clarification. And then this should leave us with at least 20 to 30 minutes of an interactive discussion at the end. So kindly leave your big questions to the end of the discussion. But if there's anything immediate, anything you didn't understand, feel free to ask them right after the presentations of our individual presenters. And as you might have heard already, this session is being recorded. So just be aware that if you're contributing and then coming on camera or microphone, that this will be part of the recording that ends up on the planetGOLD website. And happy for you to take notes, but you'll all receive a meeting summary in the coming days. So everybody that has signed up for today's session will receive a link to the recording as well as a summary of the session. And with this, briefly introducing myself, for those who are not familiar with me, my name is David Sturmes. I'm the co-founder and director of partnerships at the Impact Facility. And I'm joined by my colleague, Candace Jumwa, who helped prepare for this workshop and will help facilitate some of the Q&A at the end of the session. And I'm really excited to welcome today 4 fantastic speakers from Tanzania, Burkina Faso, Colombia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, who are pioneers in engaging with the artisanal small-scale mining sector by trying to provide financial services and products to a community that is often overlooked and misunderstood, especially by the finance sector. We'll do a quick introduction of each speaker before their presentation, but we are joined today on behalf of National Bank of Commerce from Tanzania by Jonathan Bitababaje. We have our colleague from Burkina Faso representing Chorus Bank International, Vincent Konate. We're being joined from Colombia by a representative of CFA, Juan Fernando. And calling in on behalf of Trust Merchant Bank is David McEnvoy, with Trust Merchant Bank's focus being on the DRC. And really a point of encouragement before we dive into it: post your questions, engage. This session is supposed to increase learning and an exchange between actors, while I'm really excited about the experiences and insights shared by our panelists. There's many people on this call that have something valuable to contribute, so we're looking forward to also hearing from you. during the Q&A session at the second half of this meeting. A brief framing around this. Mona has already said that this is the second of, in total, 3 webinars or online workshops that we get to host on behalf of planetGOLD. This is leveraging work that we've done for planetGOLD over the last year in partnership with the Alliance for Responsible Mining, where we've been privileged to engage with financial inclusion programs across South America and Africa and Asia. And these have been documented through case studies, across programmatic analysis, and an issue brief, which we are happy to also reference in the follow-up email. But a link to that is here at the bottom of the screen. You can find it on the planetGOLD website to learn much more about some of today's presenters, but also other projects that are trying to drive the financial inclusion of artisanal small-scale gold miners. Why is this important? planetGOLD obviously is anchored in the desire to eradicate mercury from artisanal small-scale gold mining, which requires a pivot from very rudimentary processing to more mechanized processing, and that in itself is capital intensive. But beyond the usage of mercury, ASGM is a hugely important livelihood across Africa, South America, and Asia. The gold mining sector is estimated to provide employment to 8 million people. And based on current market pricing, assuming that 20% of gold that is mined gold originates from ASGM, we're talking about more than $50 billion that this sector is producing in terms of economic value. And that's while being largely excluded from the provision of formal financial services. But it's not for a lack of goodwill on the side of the banks that is happening. The artisanal small-scale gold mining sector and artisanal mining sector at large is perceived as incredibly risky. It's an informal sector where there's not a lot of data to inform decisions around financial service provision. And then on top of that, putting the money aside, there's big ESG concerns around the sector. Ironically, or from a chicken and egg perspective, in order to address these ESG concerns, people need to get access to financing, to move from artisanal to small-scale mining, to adopt better and more responsible practices. But the private sector isn't a development actor first and foremost, and so it's difficult to expect banks to foot the bill for growing and formalizing a sector that is in dire need of investment. Because of that, and understanding that across countries where planetGOLD is active, and we've got many participants from countries where planetGOLD is not yet active, as well on the line, we wanted to talk to the organizations and the formal financial organizations and banks specifically that have already gathered experience with engaging with this sector. Throughout the 4 presentations that will follow, we will hear about the due diligence process that the banks have adopted, trying to engage with the ASGM sector. We'll hear reflections on the legal requirements and the legal framework that they operate in their national contexts, which is really important when we reflect on scalability to other geographies. And throughout the presentations and the Q&A, we want to explore in how far loan products and other financial services need to be adjusted to artisanal small-scale mining, or whether they are largely the same as other SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprise loans banks would usually provide. Some of the projects we work with had partnered with other organizations or were able to draw and invest on capital that helped them de-risk their investments. So that's crucial if we want to build a pipeline and develop an appetite for investment into the sector. And insofar that these projects are already implementing their work, we'll hear on how it's going and what experiences they've gathered to date from the loans and the products and services that they've provided so far. And access to finance starts with access to banking, as we will hear from many of the presenters. it starts with having a bank account and starts with transacting before being able to access loans and other products. And so having engaged with all of these speakers before and learned about their projects, I'm really excited for the ones that hear about this for the first time. And with this, happy to go to our first presentation of Jonathan, calling in from Dar es Salaam on behalf of the National Bank of Commerce. Jonathan, if you don't mind turning your camera on and unmuting, we'd like to hand over to you.
Hi, David.
Thank you so much for joining, Jonathan. Jonathan has been working in the banking sector for 15 years. He holds a master's degree in business administration and has focused on SME engagement and relationship building with SMEs and building out the portfolio of NBC with the SME sector. And quite recently, they have ventured into the ASGM sector and done so in partnership with a local NGO called FADE. And Jonathan, once again, thanks for joining. I'll hand over to you. And kindly let us know if we should go to the next slide, and then we will do so.
Hi, David, and everyone. If you can hear my voice, please. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
You? Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Yeah, as introduced by David, I'm Jonathan Bitababaji from the National Bank of Commerce. Of course, the bank from Tanzania, as said. And we appreciate the work that the Impact Facility has done, involving us earlier and giving us a presentation, a room to present what we have as an experience from the project that we've done with FAREF. So as shown on the current slide, NBC has got, of course, a vast experience in banking industry in Tanzania, where from 1967 to date, we have more than 57 years of banking experience. And we are serving customers from different angles, of course, from retail banking, SMEs, business banking customers, and the corporate ones. So we are dealing with various sectors, and we have a very good experience supporting, of course, small customers, including small miners. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at the bank, it has a rich history from 1967, where it was solely owned by the government. But however, in around 2000, it was the government privatized, of course, the bank, where it is now owned by three shareholders. The main being Absa Bank from South Africa, who owns the bank by 55%, and the government of Tanzania owns the bank by 30%. And you have the IFC, which is part of the World Bank, that owns the bank by 15% stake. So the ownership, you can see, is rich from local, including the government, and we have an international experience working with a large bank in Africa, which is Absa Bank from South Africa. And with that amalgamation, we have footprints in more than 12 countries in Africa, thus experiencing a lot of course, knowledge and information from different areas where we can support well our customers. Next slide, please. Okay. So as said by David earlier, we had a project under FAREF where we are supporting small miners in 3 regions of the country, where from the initiative that we have as a bank, we are looking very much, of course, to grow with customers into different sectors. And under mining, we of course we had an agreement with FAREF where we came up with a memorandum of understanding, which of course took us more than 2 years negotiating, discussing, and looking good areas where we could support the small miners. And we finally came up with a revolving fund where we wanted to support small miners in different activities that could support their mining activities from the challenges that they are currently facing. So looking at the guarantee fund that we agreed with FAREF, FAREF gave around USD 21,460 which is around 50 million T shillings. This was put aside in the bank fixed in order to guarantee any default that would be coming from the loans that bank had issued to the small miners in the 3 areas that we had selected. So NBC and FADF had agreed that from the guarantee fund that we had, should there be any default or challenges in repayments, the bank would be using 60% from the guarantee that FADF had set aside, and the bank would take the 40% risk in managing the total portfolio that we had issued out to the small miners. This was for sure a pilot project that focused on 2 regions, Geita and Shinyanga regions. We know gold is being mined in different regions in the country, but because we wanted to do a project, a pilot project, we started with 2 regions, Geita and Shinyanga, where we've got big mining, gold minings, and we wanted to learn from that area where we could later on expand after the successfulness of the pilot project that we had with FADF. Next slide, David. Okay. Now, looking at the approach that we took with FADF, because the bank was entering in a sector where it wanted to learn more, what FADF did gave a comfort to the bank by providing training to the small miners, those that we wanted to do a pilot of lending to the guys. So FADF arranged for training for around 95 small miners, where 20 were women. And this, of course, gave us a comfort because customers were trained before on the financial management, the use of funds, and how they should be responsible in managing the day-to-day activities, of course, of the mining, and that they should be repairing the facilities. So this was the training that was done by FADF, and the bank, of course, leveraged on that training in supporting those ones who attended the training, the groups that attended the trainings. And looking at the purpose of doing that training, of course, was just to let the small miners know that the revolving funds was there to support them in as working capital in their groups, but it would be available for use again after they have repaid to the bank. And the funds, the revolving funds, were given to support them in working capital, but as well to support them procuring mining equipment that they wanted, including the machineries, processing equipment, generators, of course, and looking at other processing equipment that they were using. So it was solely designed to support them in working capital and purchase of different equipments that they had from they were looking for the mining activities in their mining areas. If we can go to the next slide, David. Now, if the aim of the project, of course, was to support them have great efficiency in their production, to improve the work life of their cash flows, to improve their economy, to improve of course, to improve their marketing and the access to finance. This is the main point. And now from what went on as performance and the mechanism that we used, NBC had selected 3 groups that we had to advance funds to. The groups were selected in 2, 3. These were 3 because we said it was a pilot one. We gave them each group around 6,440, which was around 15, of course, million shillings. And this was, of course, aimed to support their mining activities in the areas where they were doing. And the conditions were very competitive. We wanted them to access these funds, which were easy first to access with competitive interest rates. And we gave them a very flexible repayment period between 12 to 60 months. And of course, the repayment was that much peanut, looking at around 315 USD per month, something that looking at their cash flows and the mining activities, the demand of gold, of course, in the country, and the production that they were doing during the research that we did, we saw the repayment could be easy for them to of course to repay back the loans. Before issuing of the loans, we did thorough, of course, analysis of the mining activities, and there were periodical visits, field visits between FADF and the bank, where we wanted to understand where the groups are, what are the areas around them, the economic areas around them, what do they do to engage with customers, and the whole story around the mining fields where we wanted to give the funds to. So there were several engagements before, there were visits, and the training that you saw that FADF did in our previous slides that we've presented before. David, next slide. Now we provided loans to all the three groups, as we said earlier, and the loans were aimed to support them in procurement of equipment and machineries to support them in their mining activities. We had three groups, and from the slides you can see the first group, of course, bought diesel generator for electricity, and the second group, of course, had 3 logs that would support mining, tools and working capital. This was the second group. And the third group, of course, had other amalgamating process equipment. They both purchased different equipment that were supporting their mining activities per se. And this was the main purpose of the facility, that to support their mining activities by procuring equipment that would support them, and the working capital that would support them do their mining in an easy way and a smooth manner. However, all the 3 miners are currently in default. This is one of the changes that we've made. Of course, the aim of the facility was to support them, but they both have fallen into default. And from the research that we did, from the follow-up that our correction department did with support from FADF, we came to understand that there are some challenges that the miners are saying, the groups that we visited that are saying. They met, of course, high operational costs, that the cost of operating the minings were a bit high compared to the cash flow that they are getting from the mining activities. Unstable production resulting from diminishing income due to low ore grade. While mining, they were doing research to see the grade of ore which is allowed in every field. However, while doing the mining, some areas were not yielding as they expected. So this was one of the challenges that the groups came up with after they had fallen into default. But however, heavy rains in the regions where we advanced the funds made more mines collapse because they are using local technologies to do mining. So when the rain comes, most of the mines got challenges of collapsing, and that's stopping production for some time. And the yield that they were getting from the rain season were much lower than what was expected before. Next slide, David. So the whole process, of course, had we had expectations from this agreement with FADF, this alignment with FADF. Our expectation were to support small miners, of course, improve their mining activities, expand their markets, expand their production, isn't the way of doing mining. However, they all, as we said, have fallen into default, and we are now in recoveries. We are continuing to recover the funds that we issued to them. The challenges or the lesson learned that we've seen from this that we did to the small miners, the big one is the donor mindset. The miners have got the mindset that funds that should be extended to them should be donor kind of. Yeah, they depend a lot on external support through donor funds. They are not, looks like not that much ready to use bank finances and being responsible to repay back the funds that they have taken. Remember, the funds that we gave them was a revolving fund, expecting that they will do doing some repayments and they'll borrow again to continue servicing, of course, the mining activities. So the donor mindset is one of the changes that we've seen. that these miners are not yet ready to of course to adhere to the banking and the financial terms that they need them to change. We appreciate the work that FADF had done before, and of course NBC we as well chipped in and went to talk to the customers, trying to educate them and trying to inform them about the importance, of course, of adhering to the banking and the financial, of course, a system that could take them far. We talk to them, we inform them. If they want to grow, if they want to go further, they must come closer to the financial banks. Why? Because there is where their support is. There is where they can be trained. There is where they can be assisted to change their mindset, to build their characters, and make them good borrowers going forward. The second lesson learned was lack of debt ownership. Of course, I said in the first point that the groups had no ownership in repaying the facility. They took it as a facility, but remember, a group is made of individual miners. So the individual miners left the responsibility to the group. However, the group is a group that had brought them together. So there were no ownership from the group members in the payment of the bank facility as a team. So this is one of the lessons learned that we have learned from this this partnership with FADF. But another thing that looks now from the bank side, that we as well have some areas to improve. We have challenges in understanding the mining business model and cash flows. You know, businesses, different sectors in the business have got different cash flows and different, of course, have got different cash flows, of course, dealing with. Now, mining has got its unique system, has got its unique cash flow. Now, as a bank, we have, of course, engaged the government several times, and we are still engaging the government in understanding the mining and of course the strategy that the government is trying to put, so that when we go in lending clearly to the mining sector, we have a very clear information. However, we saw again we need, of course, to partner with more of course, more experienced people or organizations or NGOs that have done much in mining, learn from them, and partner to do something that will do more better in the mining area. The second thing, we are dealing with a sector that needs specific products. So as a bank, we have a challenge to develop products that would for sure suit the small miners in the country. I know we have led to some miners, individual miners, but these of course are traders who buy mining, and those who have invested a bit much, and they are doing very well from what we have done with them. We have lent to individual miners, and they are delivering well from the loans that they've taken from the bank. So we are continuing to develop more product, to research and develop more products that would suit even the small miners. Apart from educating them, apart from looking for maybe funds, donor funds, for guarantee funds that would cover the risks that comes from the mining, especially to the small miners. We need as well to come with a specific products that would suit the mining cash flow, mining cycle, and they understand well how this can be profitable, of course, to the country's economy and the mines themselves. What we are doing is to support miners grow, but we want to chip in providing more employment to more small miners. I know this sector employs a lot of guys, and it is coming to support in the area of employment in the other areas of the country's economy. So this is all that we have for now from NBC. We'll pause here and wait for the question that will come later as we were introduced by David earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think there's a lot to follow up on in the Q&A at the end. Just a question to the audience. Are there any immediate questions for clarification we should address? If so, kindly raise your hand. otherwise, mindful that I don't want to run out of time for the Q&A, I would thank you for now for the presentation. I look forward to your continued contributions during the Q&A and would love to hand it over to Vincent. Yeah. Are you able to come on with your camera and your microphone, Vincent? Vincent is joining us from Burkina Faso on behalf of Chorus Bank, where...
Oui, allô?
Hi, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay.
Um,
Ok, merci bien. Merci à Jonathan pour sa présentation. Et je pense que notre présentation va s'articuler autour de quelques points. Voilà. Je ne sais pas si Candice va faire d'abord la présentation, va m'introduire avant que je ne commence.
Great. Yes. Candice, why don't you want to introduce Vincent?
Yeah, so Vincent Konate is holds a degree in applied macroeconomics from the University of Olga, and he has extensive training in the green economy and climate change. His career spans roles such as research, roles in consultancy firms, an advisor at the Ministry of Environment, and a studies officer at the Burkina Faso Chamber of Commerce.
Allô?
Sorry, this should be fixed. Thanks for pointing. So Vincent now works with Chorus Bank as a green financing officer and looks at the bank's green investment portfolio. And that's one of the things that stood out for us as we engaged with the planetGOLD Burkina Faso team and Chorus Bank and then compiled their case study, which I recommend to download from the planetGOLD website. But really excited to have you join us, Vincent. And I'll hand over to you and kindly be mindful of time and try to stay within the 15 to 20 minutes. Thanks so much and looking forward to your presentation.
Ok, merci bien. Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez. Vous m'entendez?
Oui. Oui, merci.
Allô, vous m'entendez?
Yes, loud and clear.
D'accord, ok. D'accord, merci bien. Ok, super. Alors, donc, je suis actuellement à Coris Bank, voilà, comme chargé d'affaires des financements verts. Voilà, donc, Coris Bank, c'est un groupe. Voilà, donc c'est le groupe Coris où il y a 7 pôles. Bon, le groupe Coris a 7 pôles d'activité. Donc, nous avons la banque finance et nous avons également la mésofinance et la finance islamique. Mais c'est le pôle bancaire qui est vraiment beaucoup plus développé. Voilà, donc Coris Bank, vous pouvez passer sur le diapo. Voilà, donc actuellement, Coris Bank est présente dans 7 pays. Voilà, nous avons 7 filiales et la banque est créée depuis 2008 au Burkina. Nous nous sommes étendus au fur et à mesure dans les différents pays, en commençant par la Côte d'Ivoire, le Mali. Donc actuellement, nous sommes en Guinée-Bissau et en Conakry. Et Guinée-Conakry, c'est les dernières filiales qui sont ouvertes. Alors, il faut reconnaître que Coris Bank, depuis le rapport 2023 de la commission bancaire de l'UEMOA, alors le groupe Coris occupe le 3e rang de tous les groupes bancaires dans l'UEMOA. Et Coris Bank Burkina occupe le 2e rang sur les 135 banques de l'UEMOA. Et depuis diapo, vous pouvez aller sur le diapo suivant. Donc, depuis 2016, voilà, depuis 2016, Coris Bank est la première banque au Burkina en termes de crédits octroyés à l'économie, également de ressources collectées. Voilà. Donc, diapo suivant, nous avons le réseau le plus étendu au Burkina Faso, voilà, avec 63 agences. Voilà, donc nous sommes présents dans toutes les régions, voilà, pour mieux servir. Et comme les artisans miniers sont dans les zones rurales, parfois reculées, donc notre réseau d'agences permet en tout cas de satisfaire les différents besoins, les différentes opérations. Le diapo suivant. Alors, nous avons plusieurs produits. Je pense que la National Bank Commerce du Tanzanie a les mêmes produits que nous. Voilà. Donc, mais ici, nous avons le mobile banking à travers Coris Money. Donc, Coris Money qui permet en tout cas, même si vous êtes dans une zone où il n'y a pas d'agence, voilà, que vous puissiez faire vos opérations. Voilà. Donc, on a également le e-Coris qui permet de se connecter, voilà, avec son ordinateur, voilà, n'importe où, voilà, ainsi de suite. Donc, nous sommes vraiment beaucoup intéressés à l'environnement et depuis 2012, voilà, la banque diapo suivant, depuis 2012, la Coris Bank a ouvert un département qui est la finance inclusive. Voilà, donc dans ce département, on s'occupe en fait du monde rural de façon globale. Diapo suivant, diapo. Voilà. Donc, ça nous permet de nous occuper du monde rural, donc la production végétale, voilà, l'élevage, voilà, l'économie verte le changement climatique. Voilà. Donc, c'est vraiment un pôle qui est beaucoup développé. Alors, nous faisons beaucoup de crédits à l'économie. Diapo, s'il vous plaît. Voilà. Encore, diapo. Encore diapo. Voilà. Donc, actuellement, les crédits que nous offrons, nous avons les crédits de court terme. Voilà, on a les crédits de court terme, ce sont les crédits de maximum 2 ans, qui permettent de financer le fonds de roulement, voilà, les petits équipements. Donc, pour les artisans miniers qui veulent acquérir, n'est-ce pas, des petits équipements, voilà, qui veulent financer le fonds de roulement, on peut financer, n'est-ce pas, le cycle d'exploitation. Et également le financement d'investissement, donc qui va jusqu'à 5 ans ou 7 ans. Voilà, cela permet de financer des équipements, voilà, l'acquisition de terrains, les différentes constructions qu'ils veulent réaliser. Voilà, diapo suivant. Alors, nous avons également d'autres types de produits, des engagements par signature. Voilà, que ce soit les cautions et autres, s'ils veulent, ils en veulent les traites, les crédits documentaires. Alors, de façon globale, la durée du crédit, ça va de 3 mois à 60 mois, donc jusqu'à 5 ans. Et les taux d'intérêt que nous appliquons, ça va de 8% à 12%. Alors, notre département, la finance inclusive où je suis, voilà, qui s'occupe spécifiquement du monde rural de l'environnement, voilà, a cette spécificité de faire du crédit, parfois sur la borne inférieure du taux d'intérêt, donc les 8%. Et cela est dû, n'est-ce pas, à certaines collaborations. Actuellement, il faut noter que, bon, on va en venir. Nous avons la banque a signé une convention avec AGC, donc en janvier 2024. Donc, dans le cadre de ce type de partenariat, on peut faire effectivement des taux à hauteur de 8%. Voilà, mais actuellement, la BCAO a relevé les taux directeurs, ce qui fait que, bon, actuellement, c'est un peu difficile de faire ce genre de taux d'intérêt, parce que, voilà, les conditions du marché sont un peu difficiles. Alors, donc, nous avons les types de partenariats dont je parlais. Quand on parle au diapo suivant, on a un certain nombre de partenariats qu'on peut présenter. Nous avons le partenariat avec les différents projets et programmes dans le monde agricole. Et il y a certains qui nous ont confié des lignes de crédit de 2 milliards 500 en francs CFA. Voilà, et cela nous a permis, en tout cas, par exemple, dans le cadre du PCSA, la diapo précédent. Donc, cela nous a permis de faire du crédit à hauteur de 17 milliards de francs CFA. Donc, en tout cas, les fonds que nous ont confiés nous ont permis, en tout cas, d'octroyer, de faire des conditions meilleures et, en tout cas, d'être beaucoup plus à l'aise sur les différents dossiers qui nous sont présentés. Alors, nous en venons maintenant au point sur Coris Bank qui est la préservation de l'environnement. À la diapo suivante. Alors, à ce niveau, il faut noter que nous avons créé depuis 2012 le service de la finance inclusive et depuis 2019, nous sommes lancés dans un processus d'accréditation au Fonds vert pour le climat. Voilà, donc Coris Bank a été retenu parmi les différentes banques au Burkina. Il y a eu une sélection et les actions déjà menées ont permis en tout cas de retenir notre banque. Et dès lors, nous avons élaboré un programme stratégique sur la finance climat. Alors, de 2021 à 2025, nous avons développé également des partenariats avec certaines organisations, dont Artisanal Gold Council, la AGC, en janvier 2024. Nous avons également, précédemment, des années antérieures, avec l'Agence nationale des énergies renouvelables, nous avons également signé des conventions. Nous sommes en train de préparer actuellement des conventions avec certaines structures comme le Fonds d'intervention pour l'environnement. Nous avons GGI, l'Institut mondial pour la croissance verte et le Programme national biodigesteur. Donc, c'est autant de partenariats qu'on essaie de développer. Diapo suivant. Diapo suivant. Alors, c'est autant de partenariats que nous essayons de développer pour permettre en tout cas de faire notre empreinte au niveau du monde environnemental. Alors, nous avons déjà financé dans le cadre de la gestion des déchets, voilà, en 2021, un peu plus de 100 millions de francs CFA, en 2022, plus de 200 millions de francs CFA. Également, dans le domaine des énergies renouvelables, nous avons également financé. Donc, actuellement, comme je le disais, Coris Bank est dans un processus d'accréditation Fonds vert pour le climat. Nous allons sur le guichet prêt. Voilà, donc nous allons pouvoir financer les différents projets à des taux beaucoup meilleurs. Voilà, des taux beaucoup plus bas que ce que j'ai présenté plus haut et des durées plus longues. Voilà, des durées plus longues allant jusqu'à 10 ans, 20 ans. Voilà, alors qu'actuellement, on se limite à 5 ans. Voilà, donc nous avons une deuxième structure qui est dans le processus d'accréditation au Burkina Faso, c'est le Fonds d'intervention pour l'environnement, voilà, qui sera sur les subventions. Voilà. Donc actuellement, au bas, n'est-ce pas, de la page que vous venez de présenter, nous avons le partenariat avec Artisanal Gold Council, AGC, dans le cadre du projet planetGOLD. Donc, nous avons signé la convention de partenariat le 25 janvier 2024 et nous avons eu plusieurs ateliers donc, de travail, puisqu'il y a un comité qui a été mis en place, donc, dont les membres de AGC, la banque et d'autres acteurs, que ce soit les coopératives d'artisans miniers. Donc, nous avons des sessions de travail. Donc, nous allons plus à parler, n'est-ce pas, des points positifs de toutes ces actions-là. Alors, dans le processus, il y a plusieurs coopératives, voilà, qui doivent bénéficier, n'est-ce pas, du projet. Mais nous avons échangé en comité et nous avons pensé qu'il serait bien de retenir une première liste. Donc, il y a 7 coopératives qui ont été sélectionnées, en tout cas parmi les meilleures, voilà, pour s'engager en fait dans ce partenariat avec la banque. Donc, nous avons actuellement ouvert des comptes et aujourd'hui, il y a 3 comptes qui sont ouverts et des dossiers qui sont présentés en comité, voilà, pour que les dossiers soient analysés. Voilà. Donc, nous pouvons aller au diapo suivant. Alors, déjà, avec cette relation qui naît entre Artisanal Council, Gold Council et puis Coris Bank, c'est de dire déjà que on a des leçons apprises. Voilà. D'abord, il y a au niveau des sociétés coopératives, il y a une convention entre ces coopératives-là et l'ANEMAS. L'ANEMAS, c'est une agence qui s'occupe, n'est-ce pas, de l'exploitation artisanale à petite échelle. Voilà. Donc, cette structure est devenue SONASP. Voilà, donc, et la convention qui existe entre les coopératives et cette agence-là, en tout cas, a beaucoup facilité en fait l'ouverture de compte. Il faut noter par ailleurs que le domaine de l'exploitation minière, c'est un domaine qui est réglementé au Burkina Faso et on ne peut pas ouvrir, n'est-ce pas, des comptes facilement. Donc, il y a toute une procédure qu'il faut suivre. Donc, ça n'a pas du tout été simple. Mais la convention que ces structures-là détenaient a permis en tout cas de faciliter l'ouverture de compte. Donc, je me suis déplacé au niveau de cette agence. On a échangé avec les responsables où voilà, les textes en tout cas ne permettaient pas d'office d'ouvrir des comptes. On a essayé de trouver des formules voilà, et convaincre en fait la section qui s'occupe, n'est-ce pas, techniquement de l'ouverture de compte pour les convaincre sur, en tout cas, sur la documentation fournie par les coopératives. Donc ça, c'est le premier point. Donc, il y a également la convention de partenariat entre AGC et Coris Banca. Cela, en tout cas, cela a permis de réduire en fait l'insuffisance habituelle en matière de garantie. Donc, il faut noter que les questions de garantie sont vraiment très préoccupantes au niveau de la banque parce que les clients n'arrivent pas à proposer, en tout cas, des garanties assez suffisantes. Ils n'en ont pas. Donc, du coup, c'est vraiment des insuffisances dans les différents dossiers. Mais la convention entre AGC et puis Coris Bank a permis, en tout cas, de souffler un peu en matière de garantie. Donc, au passage, il faut noter que dans le mécanisme d'accompagnement de la banque et dans la convention avec AGC, et il y a AGC apporte 33%, un tiers, n'est-ce pas, de garantie, de couverture, n'est-ce pas, du risque. Et la banque apporte un tiers et la coopérative apporte un tiers. Donc, voilà, chacune des parties apporte un tiers, un tiers. Et au niveau de, voilà, donc ça a permis en tout cas d'alléger, n'est-ce pas, les questions de garantie. Alors, un troisième point, c'est que les ateliers qui ont été organisés voilà, par le projet, en réunissant les différents acteurs, donc cela leur a permis de mieux connaître les institutions financières, notamment Coris. En plus, on a eu à faire des présentations. Voilà, et il y a eu des retours où il y a des acteurs qui nous ont approchés, m'ont approché personnellement pour dire qu'ils comprennent certaines choses. Ils pensaient, ils avaient des préjugés voilà, sur les banques, mais maintenant ils comprennent. Donc, cela a permis en tout cas de renforcer les capacités. Donc, il y a eu une ouverture de compte. Il y a d'autres acteurs en dehors, n'est-ce pas, du projet qui ont participé qui ont participé aux ateliers et qui nous ont approchés pour l'ouverture de compte. Nous, actuellement, on a des dossiers d'ouverture de compte en cours. Le quatrième point, c'est il faut noter la disponibilité, le dynamisme des différents dirigeants des coopératives qui sont dans la phase pilote là. Donc, leur dynamisme, leur disponibilité. Voilà. Et aussi, ils ont une certaine ouverture d'esprit. Cela a permis en tout cas d'aller plus vite. Voilà, a permis de réunir les différentes conditions de financement. Voilà, donc on a demandé à certains de mouvementer les comptes. On voyait que dans le domaine de l'artisanat minier, les acteurs sont méfiants parce que de façon globale, les gens se méfient également de ce secteur. Je pense que dans la présentation, il a été dit que bon, c'était un secteur, en tout cas, où il y a beaucoup de risques, c'est informel. Donc, du coup, c'est un secteur qui n'est pas bien connu. Donc, c'est pas aussi évident que ça. Mais les acteurs eux-mêmes, on a compris que les acteurs ont commencé à s'intéresser beaucoup à travers nos conseils. Alors, un autre point, c'est l'engagement de la banque elle-même. Voilà, donc la banque est engagée voilà, à accompagner les acteurs de l'économie verte et du changement climatique. Donc ça a permis en tout cas d'avoir un intérêt. Voilà, le comité a eu un intérêt pour les différents dossiers qui sont présentés dans le cadre du projet planetGOLD. Voilà. Donc, un dernier élément qu'on peut noter, c'est la rentabilité même du secteur. Je pense que quand mon collègue, n'est-ce pas, de Tanzanie présentait, il disait que bon, les différents crédits au niveau, n'est-ce pas, de leur banque, les gens n'arrivaient pas à rembourser. Voilà, il n'avait pas remboursé. Bon, j'ai compris que effectivement, peut-être la teneur est un peu faible. Ici, au niveau du Burkina Faso, je pense qu'il y a des aspects techniques que les coopératives font, dont ils arrivent à cibler les zones où la teneur est plus importante. Donc, il n'y a pas un problème de rentabilité que de le chasse. Seulement, ils ont besoin de financement, voilà, pour multiplier les actions, pour produire plus. Voilà, donc, et au niveau, n'est-ce pas, du Burkina Faso, les sociétés minières, les grandes sociétés minières qui sont surtout canadiennes, russes, françaises, donc ce sont des sociétés minières qui sont très rentables et qui arrivent à confier beaucoup de ressources, n'est-ce pas, à la banque. Donc déjà, ces sociétés minières-là, c'est vrai que, bon, nous parlons ici d'exploitation artisanale, mais ces sociétés-là donnent une bonne image en fait du secteur minier. Voilà, donc du coup, ça permet aux coopératives de bénéficier également de la bonne image en fait de ces sociétés minières-là. Donc, pour la rentabilité, il n'y a pas de souci. Voilà, les acteurs eux-mêmes disent qu'ils attendent qu'on leur fasse confiance, qu'on leur fasse, n'est-ce pas, des crédits pour améliorer leurs conditions de travail, pour s'équiper, pour aller, n'est-ce pas, de la phase artisanale vers, n'est-ce pas, la phase semi-mécanisée, en tout cas, améliorer les conditions et réduire, n'est-ce pas, l'utilisation de mercure. Et tout cela permettra, en tout cas, de mieux se développer. Alors, à côté de ces leçons, nous avons plus bas les difficultés. Alors, les difficultés, c'est bon, la réglementation. Comme je l'ai dit, pour l'ouverture de compte, il y a beaucoup de documents qu'il faut fournir. Alors que actuellement, nous avons 3 comptes qui sont ouverts et les autres n'ont pas pu ouvrir leur compte jusqu'à présent parce que, bon, en matière de documentation, ils ne sont pas à jour. Il y a beaucoup de choses qu'il faut faire. Ensuite, la deuxième difficulté, c'est la faible organisation des coopératives. Donc, les coopératives, elles ne sont pas très bien structurées. Donc, je pense que le projet les a beaucoup aidés, planetGOLD les a beaucoup aidés à se structurer, à penser à cela. La troisième difficulté, c'est la non-maîtrise, n'est-ce pas, des produits bancaires. Voilà, donc les coopératives n'arrivent pas à utiliser en fait les différents produits, les instruments, voilà, développés par la banque. Par exemple, les comptes doivent être bien mouvementés. Voilà, donc pour une coopérative qui n'arrive pas à bien mouvementer son compte, ce serait difficile pour elle en fait de bénéficier du crédit. Voilà, au départ, ce n'était pas évident, mais ils sont en train d'améliorer en fait cet aspect-là. Et le dernier élément de difficulté, c'est la non-diversification de la clientèle par les coopératives. Donc, il y a certaines coopératives qui ont un seul client. Voilà, donc on les invite, n'est-ce pas, à multiplier les différents clients à qui ils vendent, n'est-ce pas, de l'or. J'espère que je n'ai pas épuisé mon temps, mais je vais aller plus vite. Les recommandations que nous avons, notamment à l'attention de ces diapos précédents, voilà, les recommandations à l'attention des bénéficiaires, c'est vraiment de se mettre à jour au niveau des documents juridiques. Voilà, essayer de mouvementer leurs comptes. Également, c'est d'exiger toujours, n'est-ce pas, des pièces justificatives. Quand elles vendent, n'est-ce pas, de l'or, il faut qu'elles demandent en fait des documents, des factures, des reçus, voilà. Et puis, essayer d'échanger régulièrement avec les gestionnaires. Alors, l'autre point à l'attention de AGC, c'est nous avons dans le mécanisme, il est prévu que nous puissions financer et nous puissions constituer un fonds qui va servir de couvrir, n'est-ce pas, la garantie. Donc, ça doit être autour de 250 millions, voilà, 250 millions de francs CFA. Donc, on n'a pas encore atteint ces 250 millions. Donc, c'est de brouiller en tout cas faire des versements pour qu'on ait vraiment le fonds nécessaire pour couvrir, n'est-ce pas, la garantie des différents crédits. Alors, ensuite, c'est de veiller au respect la réglementation. Donc, c'est d'amener, AGC doit amener les coopératives à se conformer à la réglementation. Également, AGC doit poursuivre, n'est-ce pas, la formation des coopératives en éducation financière. Et AGC doit organiser des sessions d'examen et d'amendement des différents plans d'affaires. Alors, donc déjà, au niveau du financement vert, donc de façon globale, nous avons soumis notre conceptuel voilà, au niveau du Fonds vert pour le climat et nous espérons qu'il y aura une bonne suite à ce niveau. Donc, concernant les procédures de financement des projets, donc nous avons les différents produits, que ce soit les avances sur marché, les crédits court terme, les crédits moyen terme. Ça permet en tout cas aux différents acteurs voilà, d'avoir des financements voilà, pour les différentes activités. Voilà, donc je pense que c'est l'essentiel que nous voulons présenter et merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Vincent. There's one or two immediate follow-up questions that maybe if you can give a very quick response to, and then there's a number of questions also to Jonathan and to you that are more generic that are better addressed at the end. But one specific question maybe for a quick response would be if you could elaborate on the composition of the committee that reviews credit applications. And the second question from Rodrigo from Honduras is whether you are focusing on groups as your clients or individuals. So if you could provide a quick response for those two, composition of the credit committee and whether you interact with individuals or groups or both. And then we'll park the rest of the questions for the engagement after the subsequent two presentations. Sorry, Vincent, are you still with us?
Merci beaucoup. D'accord, si c'est par rapport à ces deux questions qui ont été posées, premièrement par rapport au comité qui examine les dossiers. Alors le comité, il est composé bon, de pratiquement toutes les sensibilités. Nous avons la banque qui est présente. Nous avons les cabinets, voilà, les consultants qui organisent, qui examinent, qui montent des plans d'affaires. Voilà, et qui les soumet, n'est-ce pas, aux différents bénéficiaires. Nous avons également, j'ai parlé de l'agence qui s'occupe, l'agence nationale qui s'occupe de l'exploitation minière artisanale, dont l'ANEMAS qui est devenu son aspect. Nous avons également les acteurs nous avons le personnel de cette agence-là. Nous avons également les agents de AGC, voilà, qui interviennent. Nous avons aussi les coopératives. Voilà, les coopératives qui sont bénéficiaires. Donc, ils ont également des instances de fêtières et autres. Donc, eux également, ils sont conviés pour donner, n'est-ce pas, leur avis, voilà, sur les différentes problématiques. Ça, c'est la toute première question. Voilà, la deuxième question concernant les types, n'est-ce pas, de clients que nous finançons. Donc, tout d'abord, nous avons actuellement dans le cadre, n'est-ce pas, de la convention entre la banque et AGC, voilà, dans le cadre de ce projet planetGOLD, c'est des coopératives que nous accompagnons. Voilà, donc c'est les coopératives qui sont ciblées. Donc, pour la phase pilote, la liste des 7 coopératives, la liste des 7 bénéficiaires, c'est uniquement des coopératives. Et je pense que pour les autres bénéficiaires, voilà, sur l'étendue du territoire, ça sera des coopératives. Et nous apprécions cette remède de mutualiser les efforts, voilà, de faire front uni. Et je pense qu'en Tanzanie, dans le cas de la Banque nationale du commerce, là-bas, ce que j'ai compris, c'est les individus qui sont assez sérieux, qui arrivent à rembourser leurs crédits. Voilà, chez nous, ici, c'est parfois, bon, les individus, effectivement, se comportent bien parce que c'est sa responsabilité qui est engagée. Et nous pensons que dans le cas de ce projet, voilà, les coopératives, ce serait intéressant d'aller surtout sur les coopératives parce que ils arrivent à mutualiser, les membres arrivent à mutualiser leurs efforts et cela permet de faire plus d'impact. Voilà, merci bien.
Great. Thank you so much, Vincent, for those clarifying remarks. And there is a number of questions in the chat box, some of them specifically addressed to you, Jonathan. If you wanted to already respond to them in writing in the chat box, please feel free to. But if we get time to address them at the end, we'll try to pick up some of them. And we will dive deeper, Dr. Boateng, on the questions of risk management and also product design, Lewis, for what it's. But in mindful of time, I'm excited to introduce the next speaker. We have Juan Fernando joining us today from Colombia. Buenos dias. In Colombia, CFA has been working with the planetGOLD team, and Juan Fernando is their director of partnerships and has been intimately involved in these efforts. And we had the pleasure of meeting Juan already in Manila at the planetGOLD Forum and then listening to a similar presentation before. So with no further introduction, I hand over to you, and also to your reminder to kindly keep it to 15 to 20 minutes so that we do have some time for questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Bueno, muy buenos días, David. Muchas gracias a usted, a todo este equipo, por este espacio tan importante que desarrollan en torno a la inclusión financiera para la pequeña minería y minería de subsistencia. Un saludo muy especial en nombre de CFA Cooperativa Financiera, también de planetGOLD Colombia y su equipo del PNUD. Y gracias a ellos, pues esta cooperativa ha ido dando pasos importantes en poder facilitar una inclusión financiera sólida y sostenible para este importante sector en el país. Quisiera que me confirmara, David, si me escuchan bien, por favor.
Yes, loud and clear.
De acuerdo, muchas gracias. Entonces, hay algo acá importante en este sentido, y es que dentro del ejercicio que viene haciendo CFA Cooperativa Financiera, se dan en cuenta 3 elementos claves a la hora de poder acceder o facilitar mejor el acceso tanto a las cuentas de ahorro como a los créditos para poder mejorar la productividad de la pequeña minería y también la eliminación del uso del mercurio a través de la implementación de nuevas técnicas y tecnologías que permitan disminuir y, si se puede, cómo no, eliminar el uso del mercurio en esta actividad. El elemento clave es el conocimiento del cliente minero. Gracias a PNUD y planetGOLD en su capítulo de Colombia y también al Ministerio de Minas y Energía, esta cooperativa se tomó alrededor de 1 año de convivir con el ecosistema minero. Ese es uno de los elementos claves a la hora de facilitar el acceso y la inclusión para este público. Es así como ajustamos en primera medida todo lo que tiene que ver con manuales de procesos y procedimientos para la debida diligencia y la vinculación del cliente minero. Hoy, nuestra normatividad en la cooperativa a nivel interno tiene unos procesos y unos procedimientos que se ajustan a cada una de las realidades de la tipología de explotación del material. Entonces ya tenemos cómo vincular al minero de subsistencia o al minero artesanal que no utiliza ningún equipo para la explotación. Eso es lo primero. También tenemos mecanismos para las diferentes modalidades de explotación, ya sea para el titular minero, para quien tiene un contrato de operación, para quien tiene un subcontrato de operación o de formalización, para formas asociativas que se unen en torno a facilitar la explotación del material, también para el comercializador. Entonces, eso fue lo primero que hicimos, ajustar nuestro manual de procesos y procedimientos que, que sean acordes a las necesidades, a los requisitos y a las alternativas de explotación formal y legal del material en Colombia. Allí, en ese proceso de conocimiento de el cliente minero, identificamos que uno de los elementos para que la minería no fuera formal o no fuera legal en Colombia era la imposibilidad que tenía la MAPE de poder acceder al sistema financiero. Por lo tanto, esta cooperativa que está en territorios mineros superó esa barrera de poder otorgar o de poder lograr que los mineros tuvieran sus cuentas para recibir el pago de la comercialización del material y así tener una adecuada trazabilidad de la explotación y comercialización del oro. Eso fue un elemento clave allí. Pero además se tiene en cuenta el ingreso de la actividad del oro para poder otorgar capital de trabajo e inversión en la modernización de su forma de extraer el material. Entonces, ese elemento es clave y es fundamental en primera instancia. El conocimiento del cliente minero y la adaptación de los procesos y procedimientos para poder atender a estos clientes mineros a través de cuentas de ahorro para el pago de su comercialización y el otorgamiento de créditos para modernización de sus maquinarias donde no exista el mercurio para la extracción del mineral. Así las cosas, entonces, el segundo elemento clave era cómo tener un instrumento que pudiera facilitar el otorgamiento de crédito. Entonces, con ayuda de planetGOLD Colombia, creamos al interior de la cooperativa un fondo de respaldo y o garantías que pudiera de alguna manera generar confianza en el otorgamiento de créditos. Ahorita, en las exposiciones de los speakers anteriores, mencionaban el riesgo como factor clave en esta actividad. Entonces, la segunda forma de mitigar el riesgo es tener un instrumento de garantía que pudiera darle a la cooperativa un poco más de elementos que pudieran facilitar el acceso y la inclusión financiera para este público. Así las cosas, entonces empezamos a otorgar créditos y con este instrumento, hoy todavía este instrumento sigue vigente a pesar de que el capítulo de planetGOLD Colombia ya va llegando a la recta final. Ese instrumento queda como un instrumento sostenible en el tiempo para poder seguir atendiendo a otros mineros. Es así como logramos entonces otorgar 50 créditos en esa etapa. Hoy estamos iniciando una segunda fase de identificación de población que necesita, de acuerdo a su formalización, acceder a créditos y aspiramos a cerrar el año con alrededor de unos 30 créditos, un público que estamos identificando en estos momentos. Entonces, y movilizamos alrededor de $285,000 otorgados para mejoramiento de la maquinaria, pero también para modernización de los equipos de extracción e implementación de equipos que reemplazaran el uso de mercurio en la explotación minera. Significa esto entonces que facilitar el acceso y la inclusión financiera para esta población, para esta importante actividad, también es un aporte para el cuidado del medio ambiente a través del no uso del mercurio en la actividad. Y otorgamos entonces también alrededor de $10,000, casi $11,000 para el minero de subsistencia. En la minería de subsistencia encontramos algo particular y es que esta minería no requiere de equipos, de mucha maquinaria, de mucha tecnología para extraer, pero sí identificamos que estos mineros no se dedican 100% a la minería y tienen unas actividades conexas o unas actividades complementarias para el desarrollo de la actividad, especialmente actividades agropecuarias que les permite el sustento diario o la comercialización de excedentes y la generación de otros ingresos. Entonces, allí otorgamos estos créditos especialmente para la siembra de cultivos de pan coger, como la yuca, el plátano, el café, entre otros. También para actividades de la comercialización de estos productos o la disposición de emprendimientos productivos que le ayudaran a generar ingresos adicionales, especialmente a las mujeres. Entonces, allí es importante ese ejercicio. ¿Y cómo logramos facilitar el acceso? A través de la alineación de requisitos y a través del uso del fondo de garantías que constituimos con planetGOLD Colombia y que hoy le sigue facilitando el acceso a otros mineros que están buscando la formalización y la inclusión financiera. Adelante, David, con la siguiente diapositiva. Entonces, esto de alguna manera, estos logros son gracias al acompañamiento que nos va entregando planetGOLD Colombia en esta lógica. Siguiente diapositiva. Muy bien, entonces ahora, ¿cómo funciona este mecanismo que logramos incluir dentro de la cooperativa? Lo primero es que desde que se pensó el fondo de respaldo y o garantías, se pensó para facilitar el acceso porque identificamos muchos de estos actores, pues tener de alguna manera eh, formas de respaldar créditos o de ofrecer este tipo de garantía. Entonces, eso es importante tenerlo en cuenta. Ahora, el fondo presentaba una cobertura del 30% del capital otorgado.
Sorry, we've lost translation.
Perdón, sí,
En la medida en
yeah.
que se liberan los pagos por el buen hábito que van generando estos actores, ese fondo le permite acceder a otros actores también. Entonces, por eso se comporta como un fondo rotatorio. En la medida en que van pagando los pequeños mineros, van liberando cupo para que otras personas que no tienen una garantía que ofrecer, pues puedan hacer uso de ella y poder facilitarle el acceso al crédito. Y hay algo aquí importante, es que esto es una garantía oculta. De alguna manera, ellos no saben que tienen este instrumento y simplemente van generando hábitos de pago importantes a través de algo muy importante que logramos implementar con planetGOLD Colombia y es la educación financiera. Antes de que los mineros de subsistencia lograran se les lograra aperturar la cuenta y otorgar los créditos, participaron en una formación de educación financiera que pudiera facilitar este proceso importante para ellos. Y Se usa también, como les mencionaba al comienzo, para poder acceder a tecnologías que les permitiera reemplazar el mercurio en la actividad. Esa era una característica importante y un compromiso que hoy están teniendo tanto los pequeños mineros como los mineros de subsistencia, que quienes accedan a este beneficio, pues no usen el mercurio en su actividad, en línea del objetivo de planetGOLD Colombia. Hoy entonces seguimos atendiendo a estos pequeños mineros y mineros de subsistencia y están llegando unos nuevos programas donde permiten aumentar el fondo y poder llegarle a más empresas y a más mineros de subsistencia bajo este mismo mecanismo. Entonces, hay dos elementos ahí: el conocimiento del cliente, el ajuste de las políticas y un instrumento que nos permita usar o facilitar un porcentaje o cubrir un porcentaje de la garantía para quienes no tienen ese instrumento o no tienen esa garantía de respaldo. Otro de los mecanismos que utilizamos de inclusión financiera fueron los fondos rotatorios. Gracias a planetGOLD Colombia y este bonito programa, pudimos desarrollar una metodología de desarrollo empresarial con las mujeres, por la importancia del significado que tenían estas mujeres en los entornos mineros. Entonces, a través de la asociatividad, a través de la cooperación y la solidaridad que generaron unos colectivos de mujeres, logramos facilitarles unos fondos para que ellas al interior de la organización se les facilitara tener cuentas de ahorro, tener microcréditos para financiar sus actividades productivas y también fortalecer sus emprendimientos. Este muy dirigido a las mineras artesanales y mineras de subsistencia. A través de estos fondos logramos movilizar alrededor de $9,000 y pues a cada organización se le otorgó un fondo de alrededor de $2,600 para que a través de la autogestión y a través de la autogobernanza ellas pudieran implementar estos mecanismos al interior de la organización. Entonces, eso es importante tenerlo en cuenta, y gracias a planetGOLD también tenemos este segundo mecanismo de autogestión que les permite a las mujeres tener instrumentos de inclusión financiera importantes. También, entonces, tenemos que la red de mujeres se convierte en un instrumento importante para generar mejores condiciones en torno a la labor minera. Sabemos los grandes retos que hoy tiene la mujer en estos entornos y a través de la metodología de redes como modelo de desarrollo empresarial en la que se busca la generación de capacidades individuales, sociales y relacionales para el buen vivir, logramos conformar 20 nodos de mujeres, entendiendo nodos como aquellos grupos o colectivos que las 20, 25 mujeres que lograran mejorar su condición de vida, fortalecer el ingreso, la autonomía económica y el empoderamiento desde la inclusión financiera, la educación financiera y los emprendimientos productivos, con un elemento fundamental y era la formalización para que pudieran comercializar el oro en condiciones adecuadas, manteniendo la trazabilidad de este material. 321 mujeres hoy están participando todavía en esta red, donde ellas comparten conocimientos, acceden a beneficios locales y utilizan ese fondo rotatorio como un instrumento importante para la inclusión financiera. Entonces, creemos que el gran logro desde CFA Cooperativa Financiera con este programa de planetGOLD Colombia es que nos deja capacidades instaladas para que hoy sigamos haciendo apuestas, creyendo en la pequeña minería y minería de subsistencia y facilitando que estas empresas mineras tengan sus cuentas, hagan a través de sus cuentas los pagos a sus proveedores, a sus empleados, manteniendo la trazabilidad de la comercialización del oro, pero además accediendo a créditos y microcréditos para la implementación de nuevas tecnologías que les permita modernizar sus equipos, aumentar la productividad y no usar el mercurio en la actividad. Y este programa también desarrolla a través del fondo rotatorio facilidades de acceso e inclusión financiera, mitigando el riesgo de pérdida y así la cooperativa tener mayor confianza en otorgamiento. Y además, con un elemento clave, como lo hemos comentado, y es el componente de género y de apoyo a la mujer que hace parte de la pequeña minería y minería de subsistencia. En esto vamos y esto seguiremos haciendo gracias a planetGOLD Colombia y PNUD, que nos genera estas capacidades de ser un referente hoy importante en Colombia para seguir atendiendo la pequeña minería y minería de subsistencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Juan Fernando. There is one brief follow-up question in the chat box already that inquired about the guarantee that was provided. Am I correct that it was about $66,000 that were provided as a guarantee for the total amount of funding that you were providing? So it would be about 20%. Does that sound about right?
Sí, así es. Son $66,000 aproximadamente.
Great. I'm sure there will be more questions after, but to make sure we have time for questions, I invite David McInboy to join us and take over to reflect a bit on Trust Merchant Bank's approach to financial inclusion in the ASGM sector. David is part of the management office of TMB, a Congolese financial inclusion bank with focus on a lot of the remote communities in the country, and a bank that was recently acquired by KCB, Kenya Commercial Bank, with branches across East Africa. And David has been spearheading efforts to develop the tools and mechanisms that make it possible for them to engage with the artisanal mining sector at large, initially in gold and now also in other commodities. David, it's a huge pleasure to have you present. Kindly try to keep your presentation to 20 minutes so that we have at least 10 minutes for questions at the end. And if participants on the call have a few minutes longer, the Q&A might run over. But please take it away.
Sure thing. Thanks, David. And thank you to the organizers for the opportunity today to talk a little bit about TMB and our work in the ASM and the ASGM space. Apologies, I have a slight cold, so if at times I splutter or take a break, apologies for that in advance. TMB is a commercial bank. We're a private bank operating in the DRC, and aside from a rep office in Brussels, we operate only in the DRC. We are home to about 1 in 5, 1 in 4 bank accounts in the Congo. That equates to about 2 million clients right across the DRC in all areas of the country, including very remote parts of the country. We're a universal bank with a general historic focus more on retail and small business banking, what we would call MSME or SME banking. Our balance sheet is about $2 billion US. Next slide, please. So from the outset, our mission was to be Congo's universal bank, very much focused on financial inclusion. We recognize that in DRC, the ASM sector is a significant sector. It employs probably close to 1 million people directly engaged in ASM. So if we are to achieve our mission, we need a response from the bank to providing banking to ASM. We also view ASM as an opportunity to grow revenues, to diversify our operations. And out of that, the bank decided about 4 or 5 years ago to develop a financial inclusion strategy, and out of that strategy to develop a financial inclusion unit itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about TMB and how we approached ASM and ASGM, but I'm also going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about commercial banks and how they think. And now I know there's a lot of generalization here, but it might be useful just to run through the thought process and the decision makers at commercial banks. So whenever a commercial bank looks at a new business, and that would be ASM in most jurisdictions, there's a decision-making process which maps the strategy and the growth opportunities alongside the risk and the resource allocation that a new business would require. And in an area like ASM, there's significant resource allocation requirements, and that's because banks are very unfamiliar with the sector. Banks will look at existing strengths, and that could, can we go back, previous slide, please? So you're looking at your strengths. Do you have the capacity, the right people in the right parts of the country to respond to an opportunity? What does the legal and regulatory system in the country look like? And are other banks operating in the sector, or have you got a potential first mover advantage? And that's a really, really key thing when you're looking to engage with a bank. Next slide, please. There are a lot of decision makers involved when a bank like TMB seeks to expand its operations into a new business area. And the ones on your screen right now, I call them the veto, those with a veto. At the very, very top of the board of directors who will be extremely risk averse, but you require board approval to invest or to engage in a new sector. And they will look at detail in any proposition to expand into what would be considered a high risk jurisdiction or a high risk business area. Now, boards will meet monthly to once a quarter, it depends on the bank, and to get a paper onto a board, and this is important if you're designing or you're implementing a program, to get a paper onto a board to consider a new business, you need at least 3 months notice. And the board agenda is busy in the schedule, and a new business will be deprioritized against existing business. So the earliest from the first interaction with a bank that a business proposition for, say, ASM would reach the board is minimum 3 months. You have the executive management. The key players would be the CFO and the CEO in terms of if the board gives approval, how does the bank actually implement a strategy for a new business area? Risk, finance, compliance, and legal all have their own areas of expertise and will opine on the opportunity, the risk, the costs. Finance in particular will look at, is this profitable? Compliance and legal, is this legal? Or are the hurdles to interacting with the sector too great, or are they manageable? Next slide, please. You have a host of other teams, business development, IT, the commercial teams, the product development, and the ops teams who will also be asked for their opinion on engaging with the ASM sector. And I really just kind of highlight this because it gives you an idea of the depth of the conversation within a bank and the time it requires for a bank to make a decision to actually progress into a new business area. I would say 6 to 12 months is not unusual for these conversations to complete in any commercial bank. Next slide, please. And the next one. So again, if you're engaging or if you're looking to engage with a bank, if you're designing a program, you need to know your domestic banking sector. You need to target a bank or banks and those decision-making bodies within the bank that can actually affect change and convince a bank to engage with the ASM sector. You need to present a well-rounded argument that talks about the risks and to the potential benefits. And oftentimes it's the latter that is ignored. You have to sell the opportunity. And in that regard, I would always say sell ASM, but at TMB2, we're also cognizant that ASM activity happens within the community where there are other opportunities for a bank too, other economic activity, formal or not, but there is additional growth opportunities. So if possible, don't limit your conversations solely to ASMs, make banks aware of the communities in which ASM activity takes part. If possible, also share risk management strategies and approaches. It can be costly to develop those for banks and very, very time consuming. So if they exist already, make it available to a bank, or at least point them in the right direction. Avoid complexity, and I'll come back to that later on. But for a bank, really, ASM, ASGM, you don't want to get too granular. The moment you start talking about ASGM, you're really refining the conversation many of the risks and opportunities that speak to ASGM apply right across the ASM world. So my view would be go a little bit higher, talk about ASM. ASGM is naturally part of that. And engage as soon as possible. I talked you through the decision-making process, so you really need to engage as early as possible with a bank. If you've got a 2 or 3 year program, you need to start on really on day one, but also have a concrete proposal worked out and not a hypothetical. You can't go to a board of directors with a hypothetical. Know your market and be aware too that retail banking is very, very low margin and very, very high cost. And this is a universal problem. It exists right across the world, including in advanced economies. And that means for a operation or a new business to be sustainable, and it has to be scalable. Where you have a low margin business, you have to do lots of business and lots of activity and make a small margin in order for that to be profitable and sustainable into the future. And a little bit more about your target bank. Understand what their areas of risk, the risk appetite, the growth areas, and in particular ESG, what the position on ESG is, because there is sometimes hooks that you can interact with the bank on the ESG area and how that can make ASM more interesting to a commercial bank. Next slide, please. Potential is really important. So sell the opportunity too. Banks will look at ASM as high risk, but high risk means that often that sector is unbanked, which provides a first mover advantage to a bank to grow its market share and diversify its revenue streams. And banks like to be a first mover oftentimes. So high risk, yes, but it is also an opportunity to be the first to engage. And typically, and you see this in sectors right around the world, what is a high-risk client today can, in time, evolve to be a low risk because the relationship is developed between the bank and the client or the sector. The bank builds data, and through that process, the risk profile of the client or clients or the sector reduces over time. And hopefully, with a really rigid and rigorous approach, you develop a a partnership with that sector. That means that in time, the risk profile reduces of the sector and the bank can provide even more products at a lower price. Holistic growth is really important too. Capacity building is not siloed. So as a bank engages with a sector like ASM for the first time, it develops risk, it develops compliance and legal tools to engage with ASM. But the risks in ASM are somewhat similar to risks in other sectors. And there are spillover effects. So an approach that's designed for ASM can often be applied to other sectors, for example, agriculture or forestry. And it's important to make banks aware of that if they're not already aware. Their investment in ASM is not just siloed to ASM. There is opportunity there. And next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about ESG. A lot of banks have ESG programs, and those programs include specific goals. If you take the KCB group, there is the group has over 100 targets in the area of ESG. Now, specific, if I give you an example how this can speak to ASM, is that a bank might have certain environmental support initiatives or a requirement to implement environmental support initiatives. So if you look at Mercury in ASGM, it could be that the requirement to reduce mercury usage or eliminate could map into an ESG goal or program of a bank. So it's important to research and talk to banks about their ESG programs and see if there is collaboration and some synergies there. That means that if you look at specifically Mercury, it takes the conversation solely out of a kind of a profit-making transaction into a split between an ESG transaction where the bank might co-fund and a private for-profit transaction. Strategic partnerships and collaborations are important. In particular, I would say for a little bit of hand-holding and speak also to the CSO and reputational benefits that a bank might gain from engaging with the ASM sector. There's a lot of negative media coverage out there. It's important, I think, to change that and turn it around. There are, of course, risks engaging with the sector. Hand-holding is really, really important. Banks need to ensure that they can speak to their stakeholders about what they're doing and why I'm doing, present a positive message. Really, really important concept is that let's not focus on access to finance first. You have to develop a relationship with the client first. That's certainly our approach. Access to a bank account first, build a relationship, build the data, and then lend. And TMB will not lend to a new client or a new sector or a new part of the country where we're operating for at least 6 months after setting up business in that area. We need to understand the local market, the players. Oftentimes there are no formal data it takes time to build that. And generally, internationally, where you see banks quickly move into a sector and start lending on day one, you get mispricing and you get very high default rates. And that's across the board in every economy and every sector. Next slide, please. And the next one. So key to TMB's interaction with ASM has been a PPA access to finance pilot some years ago. And that really allowed us to develop our confidence to engage with the ASM. Next slide. And it really gave us confidence in terms of how we can manage compliance and reputational risks. And they were the key barriers for us. The barrier wasn't economics, it was compliance and reputation. And any sector in the DRC will transact in dollars, as a dollarized economy. So when we engage with that, we have stakeholders outside of the DRC in the Eurozone and the dollar market. So we have to be answerable to those correspondent banks and international regulators in terms of how we do business. If we get it wrong, the risks are really, really significant for the bank. Now, another message, and I think we knew it already within TMB, is that we've done it before as a financial inclusion bank operating right across the DRC, including in high-risk areas. ASM presents unique problems, but there are a lot of them are shared with other sectors, and that is something that oftentimes isn't understood or isn't communicated. And you'll oftentimes find banks providing service to other high-risk sectors, like I mentioned, agriculture, and not thinking, actually, ASM isn't that different. We've done it before, we can do it again, and that's been a key message within TMB. Next slide, please. Our vision is to provide, and we are, a service to all types of actors in the ASM sector, from individual miners up to exporters, in all commodity sectors and right across the DRC, including high-risk parts of the country in the northeast of DRC, where most of the gold activity is. Next slide. The risk-reward balance is really, really important to understanding how banks think. Developing solutions can be very expensive. You have to look at the return that banks can earn on investing in developing those solutions. And that really speaks to the sustainability and the scalability of any project or any sector that you're looking at. Small sectors are not scalable, and you will never have, I think, a private sector bank responding in a sustainable, scalable way if they can't make the returns over the medium to longer term. Next slide, please. So at TMB, how do we manage the risk? We've developed a risk rating system specific for ASM activity. It's something that is universally understood within the banking sector because it maps very clearly to other risk systems and frameworks that banks would use for other sectors internationally, complies with DRC law and regulation, and it speaks into OECD and other requirements internationally too. Next slide, please. And through that program, we use multiple different data sources to develop a compliance and reputational risk profile of a client. Next slide, please. There are two parts to it. We risk rate an entity or an individual, and we have an onboarding requirement, so there's a minimum threshold. And if that threshold is achieved, then the client can have a bank account with TMB. There's an accessibility one too. So the better the risk rating, the more products the individual or entity can access. And also in time, we hope that we can evolve the pricing so that as, in particular in the ESG world, as standards and performance increases, we can reduce the pricing to the client on any loans that they may receive from TMB. Next slide, please. As I said, we risk rate all our clients. So you will see here, this is the risk rating scale. And according to the risk rating, a client can access different products and different tenors of products. Next slide, please. With the requirement as a high-risk entity to be reviewed annually. That's the current process. As our population, as that data builds up, we'll be able to hopefully reduce that requirement in time. Next slide, please. This is an example for a gold cooperative, and you can see the level of data behind this, or over 400 data points that inform this scorecard that you can see. We're looking at various different elements, everything from the legal framework to transparency, taxation, extortion, supply chain integrity, presence of child labor, modern slavery, etc. All of this is risk rated. If there are any red flags, that's an automatic default. We will not onboard that client, or we will close that client's account. And then the scoring, as the scoring improves, the access for that client improves, and ideally the pricing for that product will also improve for the client. It's a very time-consuming process, and that speaks again to the requirement to be able to scale this in time in order to be able to achieve a return on that investment. We take a very customer-centric approach to products and services. We don't like the idea of inventing new products and services for a specific client type, and the reason is that increases costs and complexity. There's an internal market within the bank, and different entities and departments will be fighting for resources. So the more complexity and cost you have, the less likely that you're going to achieve a resource allocation. So what we know is that clients, ASGM clients, they want to borrow money. Okay, that's an overdraft or a term loan. And we fine-tune our standard product according to the individual client, not to the client, not to the sector, but the client. We know there's volatility in earnings. We know that there's differences in availability of collateral or not, that the local economies where the entity engages differ. So the financial product will be amended or structured in a way that speaks specifically to that individual borrower. That requires quite a significant engagement between our credit risk team and the borrower themselves. But this is an approach that we apply right across the bank, throughout DRC and every sector. Next slide, please. And the next one. So as I said, we're all sectors, from miners up to cooperatives and exporters. We have a strong emphasis on Peple Mobile, our mobile banking product. That brings down the cost of introducing banking services to any sector, including ASGM. It also comes with quite powerful compliance and money laundering software in the background that can monitor all transactions, which obviously, again, provides confidence to both the bank and to our stakeholders nationally and internationally. Next slide, please. We've got 39 ASM clients. So this is ignoring miners, but actually entities. 15 are partially or wholly involved in the gold sector. We've got 4 loans or lease products. Leasing is interesting because the product the asset remains somewhat owned by the bank, and that reduces collateral requirements. We have 43 prospective ASM clients right now who are being risk assessed. 9 of them are within the gold sector. And I'll wrap it up there. I think, David, on 20 minutes and 10 seconds.
That was very rich in information, and thanks for doing this despite your cold. And amazing to have that on record as well, as well as the other presentations. If I could ask the speakers that were presenting today to come maybe on camera and to launch the Q&A, for which we still have 15 minutes. Vincent sent his apologies that he needed to drop off. He was only able to join for the first hour of today's discussion. But Jonathan and Juan Fernando, if you're still there, please do join us back. We've thought about a couple of questions to guide a discussion, but obviously there's a lot of input in the chat box, which we'll also want to draw on, and Candice is going to take a minute to go through those questions and pick some to be integrated. One question that stood out, and we've heard different perspectives on that, was around, do the products need to be different if we want to invest into ASM than into agriculture or else? And we've just heard from David, TMB's position that rather than think about a sector-specific solution, they're trying to tailor something to the client that they're engaging with. But if I could open with this to both of you, a brief reflection on, as you think about investing further or reassessing the learnings, Jonathan, from your currently defaulted investments, where do you think does ASGM and ASM warrant different terms, and can you elaborate on in how far they should be different? What makes ASGM different from other SMEs that you invest in or provide services to?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, David. And I think looking at the general SMEs, they do their businesses in different business sectors that, of course, might have or they have very structured operations. The cycles, they are very global. And when we need to come to structured finance, it's on very specific few products that we need to service the needs from customers, SME customers. But looking at the small miners, you look on the business that is, for instance, from the expense that you have with FAREF, the projections are a bit tricky. Why? Because we had reports before lending that was done by, of course, FAREF and the technical parts that were involved in doing the research, that the areas where these small miners are going to do mining is rich of minerals, and it will yield this certain results. But in return, we got a challenge later while repaying. Of course, doing repayment, that the areas were not yielding what were expected before. So this is a bit tricky. Why? Because we depend on other experts to come up with research results that gives us an assurance of funds that we issue out to small miners that would yield back and of course repay the loans and continue to circulate in the economy. So it's a bit tricky dealing with small miners, and we think we need for sure like structured finance, where we would have maybe a value chain kind of financing, where we need to look at the small miners, the markets that where they sell their final products, and we structure the finance that would suit the value chain. This is what I'm looking. And if we would go to asset finance, we need to be looking maybe paying directly to the suppliers of the equipment that are used by small miners in their operations, in their mining activities. This is what I would think around, and this is how I could differentiate between the small miners and the normal SMEs in the economic environment. David.
Thanks, Jonathan. Juan Fernando, do you have anything to add from your side in terms of what adjustments did you make, or maybe are you going to make to your products to continue to serve the sector as well as possible?
Sí, bueno, muchas gracias. Efectivamente, uno de los aprendizajes que hemos tenido es que los productos financieros tienen que ser acorde a las necesidades de los mineros y de las empresas que hacen parte de la MAP. Y esas necesidades se dan en términos del destino que tiene la inversión. Encontramos que hay empresas mineras en Colombia que requieren capitales a corto plazo para necesidades inmediatas. Hay inversiones que requieren o créditos que se requieren para inversiones a largo plazo, incluso con periodos de gracia, porque sus retornos de la inversión no son inmediatos. Asimismo, en esta relación que hemos tenido en este último tiempo, hemos identificado la necesidad de desarrollar dos productos importantes. El primero de ellos es un producto de crédito para poder financiar la etapa de la formalización. Hoy un minero en Colombia, para tramitar lo que tiene que ver con licencias, con plan de trabajo de obra, PTO, con lo que tiene que ver con licencias ambientales, etcétera, son costos altos y se requieren financiar. Hoy la cooperativa no tenía ese producto y ya estamos identificando que es necesario desarrollar un producto para etapa de formalización. Pero también es necesario desarrollar un producto para lo que tiene que ver con el plan de cierre de la mina y especialmente el proceso de rehabilitación o restauración de las zonas trabajadas, porque allí se requiere hacer inversiones ambientales y no teníamos un producto de crédito y sobre todo un acompañamiento para que una vez se termine el plan de obra en esa mina, se proceda a hacer una adecuada restauración y cuidado del medio ambiente y dejar esa zona en adecuadas condiciones. Y las empresas mineras están identificando una necesidad también de financiamiento de esta etapa. Creo que estos son los resultados, David y equipo, de lo que estamos aprendiendo y seguir fortaleciendo los mecanismos de conocimiento del cliente para mitigar el riesgo y hacer de sostenible el financiamiento y la inclusión financiera para la MAP.
Perfect, thanks. And another question that came from our chat box was around informal financing terms compared to formal financing terms. And David, maybe you can reflect on that, whether you've done market research or as you investigated the opportunity that you've outlined very well in terms of numbers. Do you have any reflections on how a loan, once they're able to access loan financing, might relate to what they're currently relying on if they're able to access financing informally?
So sorry, David, the line went down a bit. That's on pricing and the pricing of a loan portfolio product through the fund. Yeah. So everybody focuses on pricing, and it is important. I know in DRC, informal loans can price very competitively, so substantially lower than what a bank would provide. But there are strings attached in terms of the off-taker, or the source of that financing and the price that the individual miner or cooperative would achieve for the product. So there's a little bit of, I guess, financial literacy required in order that people are doing a like-for-like comparison, where an informal lender is lending. But oftentimes, too, informal lenders will lend at 30% on the dollar in a month, which is substantially more than the bank would, too. So there are different considerations. But one, you need to look at where we say the informal lender is competitive on the pricing. You have to look at the whole pricing ecosystem. Yeah. So what you're getting the lending for X, but what are you losing on the sale price for your product? But there are a couple of other things too. What's really important too is tenor of lending and security of lending. So tenor is how long can you lend for? And generally banks can lend longer than informal lenders. And that can be important for CapEx if a cooperative or a miner wishes to invest for CapEx purposes. And the other thing is security of contract. So typically with a loan, if you adhere to the loan conditions, your loan will run the 24, 36, 48 months according to the contract as it is. With informal lenders, you often see a pattern whereby the lender has a financial squeeze, liquidity squeeze. They need access to their cash. And sometimes in Congo, with the threat of violence, they come to the borrowers and request that the funds are returned, i.e. the loan is paid off. You don't get that with obviously with the bank. I should hope not. Certainly not with TMB. So there are three things: the pricing, the tenor, and actually the security of the contract itself.
Great. I'll pose the next question, but if either Jonathan or Fernando, you want to add more on the previous point, please do. But there was a question in the chat box from Dr. Boateng and also something that we've anticipated as a area of interest, that's around de-risking. And both in Tanzania and in Colombia, the examples relied on or leveraged at least guarantee funds, and the same with Chorus Bank in Burkina Faso. Trust Merchant Bank is banking without a current guarantee. I'm not sure whether that's categorical exclusion or just the status quo, but maybe you want to reflect on the importance of guarantees historically for you to get the go-ahead to engage with the sector, and also looking into the future, whether there's a reliance on guarantees or whether you think you will be able to do this fully commercially. And yeah, eager to hear any of your thoughts.
Yeah, David, can I jump in on that one? Because we have quite a few strong opinions on this. The moment you have risk sharing, you distort the market, and you distort the market in terms of the borrower, and you distort the market in terms of the bank's behavior. So you have to be very, very careful of how you design a risk sharing product to reduce the distortion and you can reduce the distortion to a manageable level. So let me give you an example. The borrower, and I think it was Jonathan spoke earlier about the donor mindset. So the borrower is less likely, and there are a lot of data on this. And again, it's global in every sector, where a borrower understands that as a form of risk sharing, their adherence to the terms and conditions of the loan drops substantially, and that's globally observed. So in designing a program, it's probably best that borrowers do not know or not aware that there's a risk sharing facility in the background. But also I would say the same to the bank, at least to the operations teams within a bank, because also globally observed, the data aren't as strong, but the signals are there that where you get risk sharing, banks make worse lending decisions because they know that not 100% of their equity is at risk. So what you tend to find is credit officers will make less robust credit decisions. They'll lend where they wouldn't do without risk sharing. And new business teams will seek to acquire clients that are not perhaps attractive lending proposals as they would otherwise. So its second point when you're designing a program to reduce these distortions, our view would be that only a very senior level in a bank is aware of the program, and that everybody else is unaware of the program. You can design a program that allows a bank engage with a sector that in particular is not scalable. So by itself, it will never be a profitable endeavor. But with a risk-sharing product, it might be, but be very, very careful how you communicate the existence of that risk-sharing facility. So that would be our view.
Thanks. Really valuable to hear that. Happy to hear your thoughts, Jonathan, and Juan Fernando as well, or a response to that. Before you do, just for the people that might drop off in 2 minutes, it looks like we might run over by 5 to 10 minutes maybe. But we've put in the chat box, we've put a link to a feedback survey. Wouldn't take more than 5 minutes for you to fill that in, and would help us immensely to evaluate what to do next with this series. So kindly open the link in your language and fill that in. If you do it immediately, you don't have to worry about it later. But Juan Fernando and Jonathan, is there anything you want to respond to David or yeah?
Sí, David, yo quisiera complementar que de alguna manera los fondos de garantías que se crean no son la única alternativa para que para que podamos facilitar el acceso y la inclusión financiera para la MAP. Creo que los fondos son un impulso y una manera de compartir el riesgo con diferentes actores que están interesados en apoyar la MAPE, pero de alguna manera, si no existieran estos fondos, nosotros como entidades financieras debemos buscar alternativas de garantizar el acceso y la inclusión financiera para esta población. CFA Cooperativa Financiera en Colombia está buscando cómo aceptar garantías que ofrezcan también los mineros, porque hay empresas mineras que tienen predios, que tienen edificaciones, maquinaria, equipos, vehículos, que pueden servir también de garantía y respaldo a la hora del otorgamiento del crédito. Por lo tanto, las garantías complementarias son un mecanismo que ayuda, impulsa y genera confianza, pero no deben convertirse en el instrumento permanente y determinante para seguir otorgando créditos. Creo que estos mecanismos lo que nos han ayudado es a conocer mejor el cliente, a generar hábito de pago y que luego ellos ofrezcan sus propias garantías.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Jonathan, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to compliment what David and John Fernando have just said regarding the general, of course, guarantee schemes. However, of course, looking at the approach that we are doing as a bank, we have several other guarantee schemes that we are doing with the other sectors, and they are doing much better. The approach that we took, what David said, we are not making it known to the borrowers that there is a guarantee that is carrying the risk a certain percent to what they have taken from the bank. We just lend to them as if they are covering the risks fully from what they have done. So this is the right approach I would just suggest and would complement. And looking at the experience we had with FAREF, I think this was asked by Robert. The mindset that we said that customers have regarding donor funds, this came during correction and recoveries of the funds that after customers are defaulted. Why? Because all the three groups that when we are talking to them about collecting and paying the bank funds, they all talk about the guarantee that they have with FADF. Why don't you take the 6% from FADF if you see things are not going well with us? Then the rest will be recovered from maybe little amount, or you can do any other thing that can support. So it's something that we guarantees are very much needed, and we are doing it with the other sectors in agriculture and other areas. We do have very good guarantee schemes, and they are operating very well. The only thing is customers should not know about the guarantees that they are getting from maybe from different funds that they're having. But the good thing with guarantees, I would say, is that they help financial banks or commercial banks go into sectors where we would have not gone by ourselves. So by having a combined experience and expertise from guarantee funds, we join force together and enter into sectors of the economy that we need to boost and see good results from that area. So we recommend, but we need the right approach to use the guarantee scheme to operate better.
I've got one last question, and after that, we'll close. And a big thank you to everybody attending, and a huge thank you to our presenters for sharing their insights. But the last question is about timescale. And ironically, we've run over time, but it takes months to understand the sector, years to pilot and engage, and you've been at this for a very long time, and you might not yet be profitable with your engagements, or maybe about to break even. So, and for TMB, David says that they started in 2020, and they have now about 50 clients onboarded, a handful of which have received access to financial products. So I'd love to hear your reflections on what timescale should be communicated when engaging with the sector. It seems to require very long breath in order to make this work. And a lot of the NGO projects in this sector have a limited runtime of maybe 12 months or 18 months, 2 years. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as a concluding remark, and anything else you wanted to add to close off on how you think about it in terms of long-term investment into accessing this sector. And maybe David, because I know that you have thoughts on this, you can kick off.
Yeah, sure. It's taken us years to develop a strategy and an approach. The sector suffers from a significant lack of data, and data are really important for any bank to price risk. So it's taken us a long time to develop a solution. And generally, our view is that it takes 5 years. That's 5 years to develop a sustainable business for the ASM sector, i.e. we won't be profitable in the first 5 years. But we have the shareholder support to take that medium-term approach. And that's acceptable to us because we think over the long term in the DRC, where you have 1 million actors and the broader communities, there is scale available to us. So 5 years to reach profitability, but with the ability to not reach 1 million entities or miners, but a significant proportion of that within, say, 10 years. I hope that answers the question from our side.
Yes. If Juan Fernando and Jonathan, if you want to make final remarks, our interpreters need to drop off soon, so kindly keep it brief, but final words from both of you.
Okay. I think David said it very well, that developing a product in this sector would require a lot of time for sure to do. However, looking at the country like Tanzania, we've had several discussions with the government, several research, and we are getting some data that are helping to develop the sector. We are not yet there, but I think we still need some good time to come up with very specific support that the commercial banks.
Okay, we've lost Jonathan, but with this, a big thank you to everybody attending and for to planetGOLD for allowing us to facilitate and host this session. If you're interested in joining the next session, please reach out to Candice and let us know. But it was great to hear from everybody today, and please get in touch if you'd like to work with us more on this topic and join potential future exchanges around financial inclusion. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, David and Candice. We appreciate.
Thank you.